Hello, Hoodads. Welcome into Inside Black and Gold. Steve Geller along with Jeff Nowak, and we are riding high off another preseason victory, 2-0 after a Saints 22-17 victory over the Chargers in LA, where Jeff was enduring all kinds of natural disasters to bring us the latest and greatest from the sidelines.
So many natural disasters. We had a once every 84-year tropical storm. We had an earthquake, which just kind of came out of nowhere. And like the alert for the earthquake is kind of comical when you get it, because it's like, get down, cover your head. Like, what are you talking about? You told us to come to a football game. now I'm supposed to duck and cover. What are you talking about? But that was a weird trip. 4 days out. We're 3 days out in Costa Mesa, and then we had to change hotels and go, because it's about an hour drive from Costa Mesa to LA. And then just to play a preseason game in a tropical storm, which I will say we can make a big deal about them playing that game. I mean, it was just some rain. It was really nothing significant in the sense of like, there's no reason not to have played that game. Anyway, that's that.
It seemed that's exactly what the NFL found out. They had those two conference calls with both teams, I know, before things got underway, and obviously you can't predict the earthquake, registering. It just seemed to be an awful sign of things, that were to come in that stadium.
Yeah, it was just one of those weeks, but we got through it. So for this episode, I apologize. You know what's funny? X, the way they put their X logo, when you look at like an embedded tweet, it almost looks like the button to close out. Like I could like X out the tweet. It's in the top right where the X would be to close. Anyway, So we're going to get into the news and notes in this first segment. Then we're going to do the 3 up, 3 down in the second and third segments. Well, I wanted to do this last night, but it just became so hectic. It's like a 1.5 mile walk anywhere you want to go in SoFi. Terrible stadium, by the way. Terrible stadium. It is a $5 billion joke of a stadium, in my opinion.
That's terrible to hear, right? I mean, that's awful.
The visitors' locker room. So there are 2 home locker rooms in this stadium, but the visitors don't get to use either of them, because there is a Chargers locker room and there is a Rams locker room. But then there is a visitors' locker room, which looks like it would be suited for a high school hockey team. Like the locker rooms at the Superdome, pre-renovation, they're going to be a lot nicer post-renovation, are, among the less nice locker rooms I've experienced at an NFL stadium. These locker rooms, they were just like metal lockers with mesh. Like my high school gym had this type of locker room. Anyway, it was a whole thing. It was a whole ordeal.
Not something you expect from a $5 billion stadium.
Right. And it's like, I don't know if they're trying to like mess with the opposing team. Like maybe that's it. They wanted to be uncomfortable, but gosh, I felt bad being in there because there was nowhere for me to stand where someone wasn't always like trying to get through me to go somewhere. Like, I mean, it's like a high school lacrosse team and then the Saints, and I don't know. It was a whole thing, but we got through it.
Did you get to see at least at all the home locker rooms to check them out, or no?
I did not. No, I mean, when I tell you that I walked 7 miles yesterday, I am not kidding. I genuinely, and I didn't even have my watch on until I left the hotel. From the hotel to the stadium and then back to the hotel, right? I walked 7 miles during that time, which includes the field. And I'm the type of person when I'm on the sideline that I'm pacing. Like I am rarely staying in the same spot for more than like 5 minutes. I don't know. Like I don't like it. I just like to pace up and down the field, go from end zone to end zone. So that's part of that. But when we got off the bus, in the stadium, and it was, I swear, it was a mile walk from where we were to the media workroom, which is where I had to get my armband. And then a mile walk back to the elevator to get up to the press box. And here's something funny. So I kept asking people who worked in the stadium, do you know where this is? And they would all look at me like, I don't know. And I was like, wait, you work here. How do you not know where the press box is? Like, I'm flabbergasted by this. at one point I walked upstairs because I found the press box on my own. But that's not where the radio broadcast was for some reason. Like there's a press box and then there's the radio somewhere else. And so I walked up to a group of 8 people who all worked there. They were standing in a circle right outside the press box talking. And I just asked the group, does anybody know whether the press box is this way or that way? Just point me in the right direction so I'm not walking all the way around the stadium for something that's 100 feet to my right. None of them could give me an answer. they all looked at each other and go, no, we've finally been tested. And they're like, can you wait for so-and-so to come back? Because he knows. And I was like, I mean, at this point, I'm like, I'm committed. So I'd like to just walk away. But I kind of accepted this. And then the guy came back. And so what I learned from him is that all of the workers called out because of the storm. So so many people who were working in the building that day, it was their first time ever working in that building because they were all seasonal and called in because they were bold enough to go out in the rain. And so that's why no one knew what they were doing. So it was just this, oh my God, it was a disaster. But we got through it. And they played a football game and it was none of the starters played. It was ugly from start to finish. But yeah,
there was another kind of almost like a PR disaster, you could say, with the whole Jimmy Graham incident.
I wouldn't say PR disaster.
It seemed like that at first, at least, I guess.
Yeah, it was a very confusing situation. Yeah, and so we can get to that. That is one of the big notes that I do want to talk about, independent of the game. So yeah, Friday night evening, rather, and so that's a big part of this. When the news first came out, I assumed it was a middle of the night thing. Jimmy Graham was seen kind of wandering in the streets. Cops got called. He got taken into custody. They said he kind of resisted arrest. To me, I think what you're seeing there is if you're talking about somebody who's 6'7", 260, unless he's saying, please come arrest me, you're not going to be able to arrest that guy, right? So even if he was just even like questioning, he's like, why are you arresting me? Like, if you're struggling at all, they're going to have a hard time. Anyway, so I think that was part of it. He was very confused and disoriented, and so it was difficult for them to take him into custody because he didn't want to be taken into custody. Beyond that, you assume like, oh, maybe he was out late, drinking, whatever. This occurred about 7:30, 8 o'clock. It was still light out. Like it wasn't even dark out. They practiced until about 1 p.m., give or take, like by the time they got off the field. Then they had team meetings. They don't really wrap up until like 6. So like the idea that he was like on something or whatever, I mean, if he got to work real quick after team meetings to get from 6 p.m. you're in team meetings to a delirious state of, drug induced, whatever. I don't think that's what happened. So you look at it like, okay, this was a medical thing. And to me, that's not a PR disaster. That's scary. Like that's a scary situation. And the team doctor co-signed that it was a likely seizure. And John Amos is not putting his career on the line to protect Jimmy Graham, right? Like that's his genuine diagnosis. So, we talked to DA about it after the game, and here's what he had to say.
Yeah, look, Jimmy's with us. He's healthy. He'll have some more testing to go on. But look, he's a little shook up, but yet overall, he's doing okay.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's like at this point, it's like you're not, when the initial news breaks and a guy gets arrested at joint practices, and I think everyone's mind goes to like, oh, well, when Alvin got arrested, blah, blah, blah. It was this major criminal thing, and you had
the suspension of a narcotic. That was the whole thing.
Yeah.
It was like, uh-oh.
Right, and I think a lot of it was just based on confusion because he was disoriented, and you're not gonna assume something crazy medical like that, but I mean, I think that's where you're at. And so the question now is not so much of like, is he going to get suspended or whatever, or is there discipline? The question is, can he play? Like, can he continue to play football? Or are there issues that like it becomes a dangerous situation? He's also a pilot, right? So if you're Jimmy Graham, now you're concerned like, well, what if they take my pilot's license away? You cannot allow someone to fly planes if they are prone to seizures. So, for him, it's like, it's a scary situation. So you hope for the best. And yeah, I think, it's just the news comes out and you don't know how to react. And you're kind of like, oh, well, they're just covering for him, right? I really don't think that's what's happening. I think this is a serious situation. He's back with the team. He watched the game from the locker room on Sunday, so he was able to be around the team, which is good. And so you just hope for the best. It's an unfortunate situation, but I think they handled it as well as they could.
Yeah, it just adds to the madness that went on out west while you guys were out there. But I guess surprisingly, there wasn't really much, I guess you'd say, dust-ups, fights, or anything going on during those joint practices. It seems like everybody behaved great.
Yeah, Derek Carr said it was like the cleanest set of joint practices he's ever had. And that's the funny thing, is it actually, like, the trip kind of got wild toward the end with the storm and with flights getting canceled and all this. Pretty much the entire media contingent, the Saints media contingent, was on the same flight back this morning. Just kind of funny. Everyone just running into each other at the airport because it was a direct flight from LAX to New Orleans.
I'm sure everybody could not wait to get home from this freaking trip.
Yes, it's only 4.5 days, give or take, but it's like, it's a long trip for something like this, And the funny thing is, like, the practices themselves went off without a hitch. It was perfect. Like, they got in, they got out. There was no issues. There was no fights. There was no injuries, really. I mean, I don't recall a single real injury other than Marshawn, which seems to be minor. He left early with a knee issue. It was wrapped up, but it didn't seem significant. He was out there yesterday, or he was out there during the game. He and every other starter, basically, other than Trevor Penning and Adebo and Taylor and a few others. So I don't read anything into that other than
I understand seeing that big wrap though makes people concerned. Obviously, as a fan, you're like, oh, Marshawn, please be all right.
Yeah, anytime you talk about knee stuff, you get a little worried, but I don't think there's any reason to get super concerned about it. And that kind of leads into the other thing. It's funny because the joint practices went so well out in LA until the Jimmy Graham thing and the storm and all that. But this week's the joint practices with the Texans, have been canceled. D'Amico Ryans called Dennis Allen on Sunday and said, hey, half our team got hurt this week. We don't have enough players. It's not going to be productive. Let's just call it off. And so they're not having them, and they're going to adjust their practice schedules to fit. They're still going to play on Sunday, obviously. I personally am happy about it because that means, like, in order for them to have joint practices, they would have had outdoor practices. And I was not looking forward to those because you
quickly got spoiled out in that Costa Mesa weather.
Yeah, I did. I sure did. I'm sweating right now. I'm inside. I mean, but like the thing is, to have joint practices, you have to do it with two fields. You can't really do it with one field. How do you do that, right? You would have to cut it in half, maybe, or like just do like offense, defense, and then flip, which like that take a long time, and you would get half the reps. It would just be unproductive. So at least one of those practices is going to have to be outside. And it's like one of the reasons you go to Costa Mesa to have a practice is because you can go outside and be comfortable, right?
Yeah.
The Chargers were saying that was one of their hotter practices. It was 80 degrees with zero humidity. Like, it never made any sense to me why Houston, the Texans, would be like, yeah, let's go to New Orleans in August,
where it's 111.
Yeah, it's hotter than it is here. That'll be fun. No, so they're not doing that. And I think that's for the best. I think it's I'm glad. Like, yeah, I don't think I would rather see the starters play in that preseason game personally. I think you got the practices this week. You got a ton of those reps. I don't need another week of those reps. I would like to see some game action for those guys, at least the first team offensive line. But we'll see. I think that's the next question is, without those team practices, without those joint practices, do what you were initially planning in terms of reps for that final preseason game. Because I think you are going to want to get some of these guys a bit of that work.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the offensive line. That seems to be still an issue going forward, and was definitely the biggest concern. I feel like going into the season is just how they're going to hold up, and also, your reserves, which you're going to have to lean on at some point. Who can you rely on, kind of deal. I don't know if we see Derek Carr again, though. Even though he's still new to the New Orleans franchise, and he had one great series. Do they really feel like they need to see another game situation for him, or believe what they've got already and kind of just let it roll in week one?
I wouldn't hate it. I really wouldn't, because if you had a fourth preseason game, would you not play Derek Carr in this one? Right? I think you would. It's like the only reason it doesn't feel like you should is because it's the last preseason game, but you have an entire week between, off, right? So I don't know. I think you should be trying to get him at least a series. It's not asking that much. And I think he would like to get out there too. Again, the only question is, do you want to play Ramczyk? Do you want to play McCoy? Do you want to play those guys? Because if you don't, then no, you don't play Derek Carr. If you are willing to get that whole first team group out there and not just Trevor Penning, who needs all the work he can get, yeah. So we'll see.
Yeah, I'm sure Derek would be like, well, who's going to be up front when you want to put me out there?
Yeah. Yeah. And we'll get into more of the game in the second segment here. But one thing that came out this morning, Peter King reported that there could be some interest from Sean Payton and Blake Grupe, the kicker. I think that Will Lutz is going to take that job and not give it back, right? So I would be surprised if they have any way of keeping Blake around. I think he has looked very good, and I think Sean Payton trusts the Saints special team staff possibly more than he trusts his current special team staff in terms of finding and developing players. So I think there is definitely some meat to that rumor, and it's just like, what could you actually get out of it, right? Like what is it really worth to not, because they're going to cut him, right? It's not like they're going to keep two kickers on the roster,
right?
So when you're talking about value in that trade, I mean, what exactly is worth giving up so that you don't have to fight on waivers? Because that's really all you'd be trading for.
No, yeah, and I do think there could be some other squads interested in a kicker. Just seeing poor Cade York from Cleveland the other day. I don't know if he caught that game at all with Philadelphia. He missed the kick, flag, gets to re-kick it, missed it again. And it's like, I know he's been having a tough time this training camp, even with the Browns. So kicker is a tough position. And yeah, so Grupe could get definitely some looks from other teams besides Denver. But I guess that situation there seems pretty prime, and you might want to go to that sweet Denver air to kick in.
Yeah, no, right. If I'm a kicker, I would not mind. Like, one of the reasons I think Cade York is struggling is because he has to kick in friggin' Cleveland.
Right.
I mean, like, that's just, no one wants to do that, right? But yeah, I would love to kick in Denver, right? Suddenly you're hitting 70-yarders with no problem. It's like, that's a dream. That's why I draft Brandon McManus in fantasy every year. I guess they used to when he was their kicker.
Right.
He wasn't even good. Like, I didn't even consider him to be a good kicker, but I would always take him because, 50-yarders, if you make him, you get 5. If you miss him, you don't lose anything, at least in the leagues I've been in. So, yeah.
No, just definitely one of those positions, too, that I feel like are not secured throughout the league. It's not like, oh, yeah, this guy's got their kicker. Even, you as good as Lutz has been, there's good issue, though, why some concern and, that need to push him was brought in with a guy like Grupe. But I think he, at that 51-yarder was pretty sweet and one of the better highlights from a kind of boring game.
Yeah, there's nothing I've seen this offseason that gives me concern over Will's ability. There was nothing last year either, which is honestly concerning in and of itself, right?
He was coming back from that core injury. Yeah,
and he even said he said himself that he was like a deer in the headlights at times. And it's like, yeah, okay, I can believe that. And he feels like he's in a better headspace this year. So I'm not worried about it. But all right, let's move on. Let's close out this segment. We're going to come back and we're going to do 3 up, or however many we decide to be up on. I have my list. And I'm sure Steve is going to chime in with some of his own players. So we're going to do that. And then we're going to have our final segment, 3 down. But all right, this is Inside Black and Gold. we are coming at you after the preseason week 2, a full 24 hours after, because it was a hectic nightmare with shaking and rain. And
Safe
Steve
at
was on
home
until
in good old
midnight last night.
Louisiana.
Yeah. And Steve was hosting a show until midnight last night, so he's tired. I can tell. I can see it in his eyes. But all right. Keep it locked on Inside Black and Gold. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. We are finally going to start talking about the game. The Saints 22, Chargers 17. The Saints, I would argue, dominated that game, but still almost lost it. The result doesn't matter, but I'm sure the film is not going to be kind to a good number of those players, particularly any of those that drew the flags, which
Bryan
Gabe
Edwards.
not thrilled about. Yeah. But we're going to start talking about the players who did do well, because, that's more fun. So the first on my list, my 3 up, and then I have 3 honorable mentions because I can't just name 3. It's going to be Jaylon Smith. I got a chance to talk to him after the game, and I just get the sense that he's just excited to be here. When you're a guy who was on a roster, you're a high draft pick, you expected to be a top 5 pick, and you end up getting hurt and going the second round to the Cowboys. You spent your first 4 or 5 seasons there. This is a guy who had 295 tackles in 2 seasons. Like in 2019, he had 145 tackles, I believe. And in 2020, he had 152 tackles. So that's 297, I think, if the math is correct. That's insane. And then they just moved on, right? And so he ended up spending time with the Packers. He was with the Giants last season. He was a key piece of their playoff run. He led the team in tackles in those 2 playoff games, although that second one, I don't know if you'd call that much of a game. They were just completely just run off the tracks. But, I thought he moved really well. I thought he's a guy can come downhill and lay the wood on some people. My biggest question was, can he get into position to make plays? Can he move well enough? I still don't know. I don't want to isolate him in coverage. Like, I want to avoid having him be a primary in coverage as much as I can. But I do, after seeing him yesterday, I do feel a lot more comfortable about what he can do in that role if he has to start or if he has to play a significant one early in the season.
Definitely excited what he brings to the team on the field, and love hearing, him in post game or in any kind of media availability. You can tell he's got a big brain for the game. The football IQ's high, and I feel like he knows who he is and his role at this point too, kind of thing. And
he is very positive. Yeah, that kind of you can sense it, right? I think he's a good guy to have in that room. He knows what he's doing, right? Like, you like DeMario as a leader, and he's as good as they come. But I don't think you ever can have too many positive influences on young players. And he's just another guy who has done it, right? One of the things I bring up about the tackle numbers is like gaudy tackle numbers aren't all built the same, right? Like, if you're getting targeting coverage, you're like, if you're a defensive back and you have 10 tackles, it means that they're attacking you, right? And they're making the catch, and then you're getting the tackle. So it isn't necessarily a good thing. And in this case, maybe there is some of that going on where it's like, yeah, he's making the tackle 7 yards downfield, and it's like, yeah, great, that's another one in that column, but it wasn't a good play. So I think that you can get over, like, Eric Wilson had a 100 tackle season. If you remember Eric Wilson, he got cut, right? So like, it's one of those things. But I think if you brought in Jaylon as kind of DeMario Davis insurance, if you have to be without him week 1 or beyond, right? I think that you feel okay with it.
You saw that. I mean, it was just a preseason game, obviously, but that it looked pretty seamless for him, kind of fit in right away. And just looked like he belonged out there, and obviously making plays immediately. And like I said, just love the demeanor and everything about this guy, really pulling for him. And I think it provides at least great depth at the position, which is definitely needed. There's still questions about Zach Ball, and I'm sorry. There, in coverage, I might trust Jaylon Smith already more than I would Zach Ball.
Yeah, I think they're both liabilities in coverage. But that's, like linebackers in a lot of cases will be, right? Like it's rare to find a linebacker who can, play the run very well and also run with receivers very well. Those are the top end linebackers, right? Like there's a reason those guys are high draft picks. So we'll see. But for now, I'm feeling okay with it. Let's move on to another guy who I didn't even think he was going to play. But not only did he play, he led the team in touches, and he had a touchdown, which is rookie running back Kendre Miller out there in a knee brace. I did not think for the world that he was going to be out there playing, but I mean, he played the entire first half. He got a huge workload. He had 10 carries, and he didn't. The rushing yard total, I think he ran for 23 yards on 10 carries, but 2.3 yards per carry. Math is pretty easy. It's obviously nothing exciting. But keep in mind, if I have a big concern about any position group, it is the backup offensive line because they have struggled mightily. They have struggled so much. And so I am not super concerned about him not being able to get much going behind them. But I'm excited that he was able to get through that game and not have any issues. We talked to him after the game. He was excited. He got to hang out with Max Duggan and Quentin Johnson, his former TCU guys. They're both on the Chargers now. And I mean, that catch down the sideline from Jameis, that's not a running back catch, right? Like that's like a lot of times you see running backs catch the ball and they're like fighting it, right? They're just trying to survive it. Like he goes and gets it. And we've seen that in practice. We've talked to him about it. He only caught 16 catches at TCU last year. He only caught 16 balls at TCU his senior season or his last season there, whatever year. It might have been junior. I don't know. And he's been consistent in saying, like, I can catch. Me not catching passes at TCU was more about TCU than it was about me. And, I believe him. I think he's telling the truth.
I give a big shout out to Jameis on that play. What a throw.
It was a nice throw.
So perfect. It was beautiful. It was one of the highlights. Definitely one of the top plays of that game. But overall for Miller too, a big deal was can he survive, holding up in pass protection. And I think we got a little bit of an answer at that in this game too, where we saw him contributing on every level, rushing, receiving, and even doing the pass blocking. And that will definitely get you more snaps on the field.
Yeah, that's I say this a lot. Like, you can be great as a rookie. If you can't be trusted in pass protection and blitz pickup, you're not getting on the field. And so I think he still has work to do, but that's a good start. We were able to catch up with Kendre after the game. And so here is that interview.
Is that something you've been working on in training camp?
Yeah, and they threw me in day one of training camp and was like, we're gonna need you to step up and come in. So those reps definitely are showing up now. Just all the time I put in and getting in the playbook and catching up on everything.
Look, I know you didn't catch a ton of passes in college, but you look like a natural pass catcher when you're out there. It feels natural to you, I'm guessing, right?
Yeah, most definitely. It was just, coming out of college, they look for, anything to devalue you. And so I didn't catch that many passes in college, so, that was an easy one. So, I'm just getting to show what I've been doing my whole life, and, it's just pretty fun and show it on the biggest showcase.
You got to feel good about what you put on tape this week, agreed?
Yeah, most definitely.
How good did it feel just to get back out there after another? I know it was a minor knee injury, but I'm sure just mentally going through that again, wanting to get back out there and prove that you deserve to be on this team and deserve to have reps this season.
Yeah. I kind of tried to look over it because, it was just a minor setback. And, I didn't try to get too hard on myself and be like, you got to come do this. I kind of just came lax and was like, we done been through this before. It's not serious this time. Just work my way back in practice, and that's what they did, and just come out and do it on Sunday.
Was it challenging for you mentally, though, getting back on the field so quickly?
Not really. The first day I was just like, dang. But I kind of just slept on it, woke up, and I was like, got to go grind.
Did you know it was minor right away, or was there ever a moment of damn, here we go again?
When it first happened, it was a little bit, but it was nothing like the first time it happened, so I knew it wasn't, as bad. But 20 minutes later, I felt fine. I was like, I can go back out there. And they was like, nah, you're done for the game. But, I knew it was minor.
Have you played with a knee brace before? Is that something you kind of get used to?
I definitely got to get used to it. I've never played with a knee brace, but, after so long, you kind of forget it's on. But it's cool, though.
Yeah.
What's been the process of just learning the blitz pickup? And it seems like that's come like really, really fast. I know some of your coaches were saying like might be the longer curve, but it seems to be pretty natural for you already.
Yeah, really that comes with reps because it was a while that it took me to, like when we first got to camp and starting out, to just understand everything. But, I'm starting to feel way more comfortable doing it now.
That's like 3 weeks, though. That ain't really that long.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. They've been giving me plenty of reps in practice, so I've been trying to, get that fast track and just pick up on everything.
Is that something you've been like studying a lot, or is it just going out there and repping it and picking it up?
So I'm like more of a rep type of learner. So like going out there doing reps at practice every day, I just kind of starting to pick it up fast.
What's the biggest thing that you picked that up? Is it the biggest thing to learn there? Is it is it a reaction thing or is it reading thing? When you're phrasing this.
I say for me, it's like more of a reaction. I kind of look at it as playing running back. Like we got to react off different things. And, if I see this dude pop off, I know I got to get my eyes across and just, pick up the blitz. So it's kind of a reaction thing.
Yeah, so that's why the reps, I guess, would be important.
Yeah.
And can you describe that catch today? Just like what happened on the play? Was it kind of just like an instinct thing to kind of dive for it like that?
Yeah, so I kind of slowed up because I didn't know if James was throwing it, and then the ball kind of got lost in the lights. But once I seen the ball appear, and I was like, "Oh man, it's coming to me," I was like, "I gotta stretch out and get this," and so I stretched out and grabbed it.
Yeah, and I think Kendre is just a fun player to watch. He's just getting better and better every week. So yeah, stock up in my opinion.
I was gonna say, it's like, what do you think, like fantasy wise? Would he be like late round consideration, like a flyer on for this season?
It's really tough to. I mean, with Jamal in the building, I don't know how you would roster in a dynasty league. 100%, I want Kendre. Right,
I hear you.
In 2 years, he could be a top running back in terms of fantasy. This year, maybe weeks 1 through 3, assuming he's the guy behind Jamal, it might be worth rostering him. So maybe you do draft him in late and see what happens. But I think, if people get hurt, who knows? But if everyone's healthy week 4 and beyond, it's really tough for me to project much for him.
No, I definitely have to. I would agree with
at
you
least
on
from a
that
fantasy perspective.
Yeah, dynasty league, like you said, for sure. I want him, that kind of back on my roster for the future. But for this season, I'm not just sure on exactly how much we'll see him contribute.
I agree. And moving on to my last stock up player, Payton Turner. He's a guy who been watching closely, been waiting, and we've seen flashes. We just haven't seen them consistently enough, right? Like he's had a couple nice games, he's had a couple nice moments, but then you'll go months without talking about him, or at least anything beyond. Where is he? Is he out there? I haven't said his name in a week. But he had a really nice play in this game, and he's very explosive off the line. And when he wins, he gets there fast. And that's what happened. Easton Stick was making everybody miss, right? Like he was running around. He's fast. He's mobile. And Payton got upfield in a flash, knocked the ball out. Bryan Edwards came back and got that fumble recovery. That was right before the drive with Kendre Miller catching the pass and then running in the touchdown. So that play led directly to 7 points. And it's the type of play that I'm pretty sure did not happen once last year. Like, I don't recall any type of pass rush turnover forced like that. And it's just good to see. And I think that's a confidence building moment for him. I think that he has a chance to have a really big year.
No, that made me smile just because I was thinking too, that whole situation, how it was set up. Turner comes in, knocking the ball loose. Brazil jumps on top of it. And I think it was like, boom, bing, bang, boom. 3 plays later, you're in the end zone. It's like, yeah, points off of turnovers. That's how you do it.
Yeah.
And something we did not see at all, man. It was rough because whatever you want to say, the ball didn't bounce their way. Things just didn't happen last season in that category. And we've seen that now for 2 straight weeks, at least in the preseason. So we're hopeful that's contagious. That part is contagious, at least.
Yeah, football just seems so much easier when you force turnovers, right? Like, I mean, we're going to talk about the penalties, but there's so many penalties, and they still managed to win because of those turnovers, right? Like, you could do a lot of things wrong and turnover, and if you get the turnovers, things will still tend to break your way.
Yeah,
it really is. Yeah, like playmaking on defense is vital. And so, yeah, it's good to see. I maybe it's a mirage, but I don't think so. I think like tendencies exist and the ability to do that. So yeah, I'm excited about that for sure.
That's what I'm definitely hoping for too. Like you said, it's like that habit that, we can get these takeaways. We've been working on them and we've seen that happening definitely for this season. Need that to translate to the regular season because it was being at the bottom in that category. I don't think this team's typically been in those, in that kind of situation. And for it to be just that low last year was just really abysmal.
I agree. Okay, moving on. We got a few honorable mentions. I do want to mention them. Shaq Davis led the team in receiving.
Yeah,
thought he had a solid day.
Shaq.
Yeah, I don't. That his long catch probably should have never happened because only Jameis would have thrown that ball. What I will give Shaq credit for on that is he, late hands. He did not give the game away. But like the only reason that defender has no idea the ball is coming is because he had it covered. There's no reason he would expect the ball, and then all of a sudden it's there, right? So like I'm not, like that. That wasn't even the more impressive catch to me from Shaq. It was the one where he went up from Jake Haener and caught it, high pointed it. I don't even know if that was like the best route I've ever seen in the world, but he battled for it, and that's what I want to see from him. He'll get better as a route runner, but I think that contested catch part of his game is just something you got to have.
Amen. Agree totally. It's like you either got it, you don't, and he's got it, and I want to see more of it. So my arrow is definitely big up on Shaq. And you got to be awesome when your name's Shaq, I feel like, or at least
you got to be big.
Dude.
You got to be big. Yeah. All right. So a couple others. Jontre Kirklin, 3 catches, 59 yards. He also had a carry for 8 yards. I think he's intriguing, right? Like he's a guy who just does a lot of things. I think he's a practice squad guy. He can return kicks. He had a solid game. Yeah, he was on the receiving end of that extended play from Jake Haener. I think his first throw of the game, and kind of the play broke down. I think it was designed to go to Ellis Merriweather, and he kind of just rolled out, and then found Jontre. And I've always found like when you can be that guy who can create off schedule from a receiver and a quarterback perspective, I think that's usually a good sign of chemistry. Because you understand where the quarterback wants you to be, and you get there and he delivers it, and it was like a 55-yard catch and run, so that was good for him. It's just nice to see him make an impact, right? I mean, he's only been around for about a week and a half. He's making his presence known.
That's what I was gonna say too. Yeah, has been a guy that hasn't been around this team much, and already someone we've seen making plays, and seems to be someone you could use in a different variety of spots, an interesting chess piece for the offense, maybe that could be practice squad with an ability even to help out on special teams.
Yep, crazy athletic, can do a whole lot of things, and I like it. A couple others, Lonnie Johnson, I thought had a solid game. He did come off with a shoulder injury, it looked like, but he was back on the field. He caught the interception at the end. He also had a really nice special teams play. I think he's gonna end up being a gunner on this team. There was Lou Hedley punted it, and he fielded it. Like you'll see guys go down the ball, right? Like they're diving and trying to get at the one. He was standing at the 5-yard line and caught it as if he was the punt returner. That's impressive. But from both the kicker and the guy, right? Like you don't see that very often, because like it's hard to even get down there in time. He got down there in time to set and catch it. Like it was returning anyway. I thought he had a solid day.
Yeah, and for whatever reason, the name Lonnie, I find a great affinity towards it. It's fun to say, and I'm just rooting for him.
For any particular reason?
I don't know why. Just Lonnie. It just rolls nicely. I like it.
Lonnie. Leo, is it short for something?
I don't know. I should look that up. I'm praising the guy.
Let's see. I'm gonna Google Lonnie Johnson. See if it's got a full name in here.
Might just be it's Lonnie Johnson Jr. too. So
yes,
there's a senior.
So he is young Lonnie. No, I don't see anything. Let's see. Is Lonnie short for something? Okay. Name Lonnie is primarily a gender-neutral name of American origin that means noble, ready. It is a nickname typically for the name Alonzo or Lawrence. So that would make sense, Alonzo.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the Lonnie just flows. Another guy that was flowing, I would say you got to, with the, at least put honorable mention for stock up. How about Niko Lalos, man?
Yeah.
The
That's what I was
Cajun,
good. Yeah.
the Cajun Cannon Bobby Hebert called him a Lawrence Taylor-like performance. Might have been the greatest preseason action he's ever seen. I was like, oh my goodness, Bobby, equating Niko Lalos to Lawrence Taylor.
Niko Taylor. No, dominant. 3 sacks, a pass defensed. His 3 sacks, he had 28 yards on those sacks, right? They averaged 8 yards lost. And we talked about it. You know, Easton Stick was running everybody around. He was able to get there and make those plays. One of them was a 4th down stop. Another one was the 3rd down stop that I assumed was going to end the game until Anthony Johnson decided to just wait and hope the ball would fall into his hands like a punt. And then that ended up being a long, like a 36-yard catch to extend that game. But Niko was the one who made the play to turn it into 3rd and 23 or 4th and 23, whatever it was.
Right.
No, great game. I got him for the walk-off interview. Nice guy. We haven't got a lot of chances to talk about him. And, you know, you talk about how can a guy like Niko put his stamp on this roster and make his case to make a roster? Well, you saw it, right? Like, that's the type of performance that's like, I still don't know if he's going to make the roster, but you know, he's going to make these coaches take a long look after that type of performance.
Sure makes me, you know, go to Google, you start looking up anything you can about him. Fun fact about Niko.
LeBron James is a fan.
He also 10 years old, a Taekwondo black belt. 10.
Okay.
He could kick
Went
my
to
ass
Dartmouth?
at 10 years old.
Yeah, don't see a lot of Dartmouth guys in the NFL. So he's smart.
That too, right?
Ivy Leaguer. Anyway, yeah, no, he was on my list as well. Brian Brzee, obviously, I think he had a solid game. I've been impressed with him. There were a handful of really nice performances. I thought Jake Haener, although he didn't get in the end zone, had a nice bounce back game in terms of, you know, I thought his first drive of this game was very impressive, unlike his first 4 drives of his debut, and then he kind of ended it well. You know, it's not his fault that yeah, we'll get into it, but everyone just let him down in the end zone of that drive. Like, he threw at least 4 touchdown passes that did not count as touchdowns.
He also took a good shot to the head that game too.
He did, and he went off. He got checked out. He came back clean, so that's good, right? Like, you worry about a small guy like that taking a hit to the head. It was a dirty hit. I bet it gets fined. If Quan Alexander's pulling a $40,000 fine for the hit he made,
that was
better get fined. Yeah, that was bad. I was talking to Deuce about this. I mean, these guys don't make that much in the preseason. Quan's not making that much. $43,000 for Quan Alexander. I mean, he's in debt now. Like, he's not making that much in the preseason. He's not, like, with that fine, he's not going to be able to pay it until like week 2 of the regular season. Like, that's a significant amount.
I hope there's some kind of appeal process in that, and that at least gets lowered. But it seems ridiculous at all that there's even a dollar amount attached to it.
It's a second offense, I believe, and so that's why it's up there. But it'd be like you getting like a $600 speeding ticket, right? Like, guys, let's be reasonable about this. Anyway, and I don't think it was even a bad hit. 10 years ago, that would have ended up on a jacked up segment.
Yeah, exactly. And that's for whatever reason, they decided to pick on Quan with that. Yeah, I didn't think there was anything, you know, malicious or anything wrong with his hit. And you're saying that's a second time offense. I'm curious what the first one was about.
That said, it was probably with the Saints. That said, the hit on Haener was, I mean, that's the type of hit that's like in the regular season, you're like, okay, let's dial it back. In the preseason, you're like, get out of here. What are you doing? Like, what are you trying to prove here? Earhole a guy in the preseason for no friggin' reason. Anyway, so good to see Jake's okay. He was able to get back in the game, obviously. You know, it is interesting how it takes them like 2 or 3 plays to figure it out. Because he didn't come out right away. He threw a pass and then they pulled him out. But he's healthy, so it's good.
Yeah, and that was something I was kind of curious about, because you didn't see obviously any signs that all of a sudden he was woozy or, you know, kind of out of it at all. But I guess the medical staff just wanted to take extra precaution because seeing it on film, I guess it looks a lot, very violent, and just check him out to be safe, because he might not even know he's got a concussion. Who knows?
No, and he wouldn't self-report it, right? So they got to do that.
I'm not coming out.
Yeah, yeah. But I think that's it for me. Is there anyone else you wanted to highlight before we move on?
No, definitely touched on a lot of the guys I was thinking of, and definitely, like I said, the guy I'm anxious to see more of, and hopefully it happens in the coming practices and heading into the preseason finale, is with Shaq Davis, just because it made me kind of jump and get excited, and that's not doesn't happen much in the preseason. So if Jameis wants to put up those prayers to Shaq, keep on doing them for me.
Yeah, if you want to work on jump balls, Jameis is your guy. He's going to give you a chance. Maybe sometimes when he shouldn't, but he's going to do it. Now is the time.
It's God's plan.
It's God's plan. But all right, that's going to wrap up that segment. We're going to come back. We're going to hit you with some 3 downs or 3 down players, or it's actually more than that. It's kind of confusing, just like that game was. But we're going to get into it. I'm Jeff Nowak. He's Steve Geller. This is Inside Black and Gold. Who dat? Stick around. And we're back. One more trip around the sun here on Inside Black and Gold. And in this one, we're going to get mean.
Negative Nancy section.
We're going to be big old jerks to the players who kind of stunk a little bit. So it's going to be 3 down. I'm Jeff Nowak. He's Steve Geller. If you haven't subscribed yet, do that. I'm going to be canceling my subscription to Bryan Edwards. I can't do it anymore. I can't do it. The weird thing is I think he's had a few solid practices in a row. He's been stacking some good days. But man, when you get 2 offensive pass interference penalties in 4 plays, both of which wipe touchdowns off the board, and in between those, you dropped a pass in the corner of the end zone that should have been a touchdown. I mean, come on. 4 targets, 0 catches.
Just series of definitely unfortunate events for him. Not good.
Yeah, and I mean, he's not the only one who had penalties, right? Like, there was a lot of penalties in that game. We're getting into more of that.
But when you're racing 6, that's definitely going to stand out a lot. Twice.
Yeah. And OPI, it's like, if you can get called for penalties that are not necessarily your fault, right? Like if you're just trying to make a play and you get your hand caught in someone's face mask, or you panic and hold somebody, and it's not necessarily like something you could have prevented. It's just like, oh man, yeah, it happened. In this case, it's like I kind of equate like pick plays, rub routes to like flopping in basketball, and like if you just have to be a good enough actor, right? Like that's part of it. It's not about, like running a pick is illegal. All you have to do is make it look like you're running a route, right? And so that's where it comes. And Dennis Allen said the ref told him that he didn't think that Bryan was running an actual route on that second one. And it's like, it's just you got to know how to do it. You got to do it right. And the first time you can be like, fine, that stinks, but whatever. The second time, it's like, Jesus, dude. Twice? Like, they literally just called it on you. You should be aware of what's happening. And it's just like, it's frustrating to watch. And, my stock was already not that high on him to begin with. Right. But it's only getting lower. And, I don't think they don't have to do those initial cuts anymore. Like this year, you're just doing all the like one big cut down to 53. If they were cutting down to 80 right now, he would be on that list for me.
Yeah, you look at the wide receiver room too, and we we're raving about guys like Shaq Davis, A.T. Perry, Jontre Kirklin, even Bryan Edwards. You're gonna make these mishaps and cost your team points. Definitely, some of the the calls with the refs I didn't agree with all the way in this game, obviously, but I think it's hard to argue Shaq's penalties in those situations. I mean, not Shaq's. Right. I'm sorry, right. Edwards.
Yeah, I mean it's just you can't get out of your own way. There's nothing I can do for you. It's hard to look at him and be like, oh yeah, I can see the upside, right? Like it's just not there. Yeah. And I don't need to be too mean because I'm going to be mean to this next guy too. And, He's a guy who we talk about a lot, and we just keep waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. And I'm, at a certain point, you just got to be like, okay, this is going to be a redshirt year, and that's Isaiah Foskey, guy who it feels like you can see his confidence just like it's like if it was a gas gauge, the needle would have broken off. Like, what's happened to him? Because he just didn't. I mean, like he had chances to make plays in that game, and it was like he just, I don't know, like it didn't. I don't know if he had the effort was there. There was one point where I'm pretty sure he was getting reamed out by Dennis Allen because he had a chance to make a tackle on Easton Stick and he just whiffed. And I'm not out on him. I'm not giving up on him. I think if you're calling a second round rookie a bust after 2 preseason games, you're doing it wrong. But it's hard to look at what he has done to this point and have any real optimism about expecting an impact from him in his rookie season. If guys get hurt and he gets thrown in there, maybe he surprises some people, but like he's not beating anybody out. He's not beating out Tano, right?
No, right.
He's not beating out Payton or Krull. So I think this is just going to be a developmental year for him.
Yeah, it's definitely been frustrating. And I even made a comment where I thought there was one decent rush he had on the quarterback before, leading up to halftime. And then the talk and text line on the radio station like killed me for saying, what are you seeing? Are you crazy with Foskey? There's just it's frustrating. Obviously a second round pick. It's a high draft capital you've invested in this guy, but I'm not going to say bust either, but there's concerns of obviously about you're not seeing much of anything so far. And yeah, you just want to get some kind of production you would figure out of a second round draft pick in year one, but it's really not looking that case right now. Maybe something happens. That light goes off 4 or 5 games into the season kind of thing, but I definitely would think he's more of a project that's going to be need more time to develop before you just say, oh, he's just throw him to the turf. The Saints, Saints wasted a pick.
Yeah, he's a young player, right? I think you would have hoped to see him look a little more NFL ready than he has. But go look at what Cam Jordan did as a rookie, right? It's different for everybody. And, what DA did say, he feels like he's progressing, and maybe he is. And I'm not going to pretend that I know everything there is to know about Isaiah. Just have not seen it in either of these games. We have not seen a ton of it in practice. So, hopefully he can start stacking those days. But yesterday was just not a good day for him. And I don't think we need to go in any more of it than that. Down.
And I think the problem too, Joe, not to pile it on, but the problem is we haven't even seen it in training camp practices, much less a game situation.
No, I mean, I can't recall any time I've been like, oh yeah, great play by Isaiah, right? Like, maybe, yeah. One of the things the Saints really emphasize is playing the run, and maybe that's kind of gotten in his head a little bit, and he's a little slower in the pass rush game than you'd like him to be. I don't know. We'll find out, but stock definitely not up for him. The next player on my list is actually 13 of them. Because that's how many players got flagged in that game. 13. You only had like 40 players active in that game. I don't even know if you had that many. There was at least 15 players, maybe 20, that were not in uniform. It could have been even more than that. It was basically the entire starting offense and defense. You had 13 players penalized in that game. And I'm going to go through them. These players had multiple penalties called on them. Storm Norton, Lewis Kidd, Bryan Edwards. Now, Storm Norton, I think, is only at fault for one of his penalties. He got called for a hold. Later in the game, he got called for a false start. But there's this point where the center causes his lineman to false start because he doesn't snap the ball when he's supposed to. And that's what happened there. That should be Max Garcia. So you could really say 14 players who should have been flagged. That was that crazy play. There was also a play where I can't remember who it was. It was ineligible downfield. Oh, it was Max Garcia who has a penalty, so it is still 13. But that was the play where there was 4 penalty flags on the field, and they just had to decide which one they wanted to enforce. So those are the players with 2. Then you had Lonnie Johnson with a face mask. Smoke Monday got called for a hold on a return. Isaac Yiadom got called for defensive holding. Troy Pride got called for defensive pass interference. Tommy Kramer got called for offensive holding. Alex Pihlstrom got called for offensive holding. Chuck Falanga, who I talked to yesterday, is a really nice guy, got called for a false start. Jack Heflin got called for defensive holding. Paulson Adebo got called for illegal use of hands that got declined. And then Max Garcia got called for an ineligible man downfield, and that got declined. 14 penalties, 141 penalty yards.
Brutal.
Now, you're trying to make a roster. You're trying to impress your coaches. That's not a good way to do it. And I mean, like you could say the starters aren't in there, and I get it, but we saw the starters, like we saw a lot of penalties get fly at these joint practices. It's got to be something this coaching staff emphasizes.
Well, the problem was too, even when, you know, we had preseason game number 1, the penalties were an issue there too. So that's a unfortunate continuous trend that definitely can't continue on. We don't want that to be habit forming. We talked about the takeaways being the positive side of that. I don't want 7, 8, 9 penalties a game to be the norm for the Saints squad going into 2023.
I mean, you're going to get called for penalties. It's going to happen. There's only so much you can do to avoid them, but this ain't it, right? Like this can't be it. And I asked DA about how you go about fixing that, and here's what he had to say.
DA, talk about cleaning up penalties. What are some of the things you do when it's kind of?
Well, look, so the pre-snap penalties can't happen. That's just a total lack of focus. And so that's got to get cleaned up. And then really you got to look at the tape, and you got to determine from a technical standpoint, what could you have done better technique-wise to put yourself in a better position, specifically on some of the holding calls. And look, from my vantage point, I probably don't believe they were all holding, but the flag went down and they threw it, and so we got to look at it and see what we can do better.
And just in terms of the OPI, I think Bryan Edwards had 2 in a 3-play span. Is that just kind of a technique thing?
Yeah. Look, I think, on that particular play, he's kind of running a little slant route. The DB kind of jams him, so, the official explained to me that he thought that he really wasn't really running a route, and so we'll look at the technique there. But all those are teachable moments, and that's part of what the preseason's all about.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with that. Like, that's why you're playing these games. That's why you have these guys in there. But it's got to be like there's got to be some accountability, right? Like that's where you're at right now, and you're going to go over that film, and I think there's going to be a lot of yelling in that meeting room today or tomorrow.
It definitely seemed excessive this game, and we were kind of joking. It's like, it's those LA referees. They just hate New Orleans.
Maybe that is it. Maybe.
But I mean, I know Hockley was one of the son, right? Was part of the crew.
John,
right?
Yeah, I think Ed is retired. I don't think he's a ref anymore. But yeah, Sean Hockley. Just not good. But all right, going one more down the list. This one's really unfair. It's I don't even kind of put it in a stock down situation. It's kind of more like this is a player who I thought had a huge opportunity to put down a performance that, if it didn't earn him a roster spot, had him in kind of the catbird seat. And as we talked about with Jimmy Graham, we don't know what his situation is going to be. Is there going to be a spot on the roster to be had if he's unable to play? Like, we don't know right now. I don't think the team knows. I don't think Jimmy knows. I don't think the doctors know. And Lucas Krull had a chance to have a huge game. He had a few nice plays early on. That athleticism is legit. The pass catching seems to be legit, but then he had multiple chances. He had one chance in the end zone on a great ball thrown by Jake Haener. Those OPI calls don't happen if he just holds on to the ball. He had 2 hands on it, and all he had to do was not let it get raked out by a DB in the back of the end zone, and he was unable to do it. And that cost you 7 points because you didn't score a touchdown on that drive. That ended up being 3 points, so it cost you 4 points, I should say. But like that was an opportunity for him to have a really big moment. He had another play later in the game that I think the same thing happened. He just had the ball raked out. Maybe it might have been earlier. I can't recall. But he had at least one more play where it's like, oh, that should have been a catch. And he just could not haul it in. And those are your moments, right? That's when, as a young player, as a fringe roster candidate, you have a chance to make a lasting impression and to be like, this is why you want to keep me around, because I can make plays like this. And he just didn't do it. And like, I don't want to say his stock is down, because I think that he still did look good. He is an impressive young player. He's in his second year, so I'm not going to say he's, hopeless, obviously. Like, I still I think he's a practice squad guy and he's kind of developing, but I was very disappointed that he was unable to make those big plays.
No, I totally know what you mean there, because like you said, it's not like, oh, you're really down on him, but he had a chance to really pop and
Right.
be on the plus side of this equation, and he ends up being in the down category just because he had those a few of those drops, and he was targeted a lot.
Yeah, 8 targets, 3 catches, 30 yards. Right. Like, that number's got to be higher. He led the team in targets by a fair number. Shaq Davis, A.T. Perry both had 5.
You got to be 6 of 8 there or something.
Yeah, even if he's 4 of 8 with that touchdown, I feel so much better about it. Yeah, like that's the frustrating thing, because he's so athletic and he can move, and I know blocking is a big question for him, but at a certain point, it's like, if you're making enough plays, then we can live with the blocking, whatever it is. And I just think he didn't do himself any favors in this game. But
the only good thing with that too is, Jeff, is that maybe it kind of hides him a little more from other teams that are tight end needy, and maybe they don't really consider Lucas Krull when they look at something like that, and don't know the whole story with him.
That's possible. So stock down.
Yes, no, don't look at him.
Is a mirage. But yeah, that's it. That's all I had. Anyone else that you wanted to point to?
No, you pointed out for definitely me, one of the offensive linemen I thought that didn't live up to par, besides the penalties, was Storm Norton. Just looked like he got worked over too much, although he did have a play where he kind of wiped out a DB, I believe, though.
He's a big dude. He stormed during the storm.
Yeah, but still, down as a whole, I guess, too, stock down on the backup offensive line.
Storming.
I feel like there's got to be somebody on the street that could even help this group. I don't know.
That is a good question. But the good news is it's the backups. Calvin Throckmorton left with a rib injury, so right. You're already kind of questioning that depth, and the one guy that you kind of feel like you pretty well is now dealing with an injury. So yeah, it's that's a group on this team that, if the health goes away, it could go sideways, I think.
Huge concern for sure. Definitely when you look at depth, the weakest, but I think a lot of people talk about depth at offensive line being pretty, subpar around the NFL. It's not easy having, those big boys that can come in and just fill those holes easily.
I agree. But all right, I think that's going to wrap it up for us on this here episode of Inside Black and Gold. We're 2 preseason games in. We have 1 to go. No joint practices. They're going to face the Houston Texans on Sunday. I think this is going to be the week that I finally make good on that promise to update my roster projection. And because I think the next episode this week will be kind of figuring out who are the 3 or 4 players that might be able to secure a roster spot in that game. Because, this is where we're at right now. It's like you have a 90-man roster, and maybe 3 guys on that roster can win a job. Even guys like Taylor, Alante Taylor, and Paulson Adebo, like, they're both on the roster. It's just a question of who starts.
Right, where they fit in the puzzle, but they're definitely in the puzzle.
Yeah, so I think that's kind of what we'll look at in the next episode of this week. Saints are back at practice tomorrow, so that we'll probably post that episode on Thursday or Friday. But thanks, everyone, for listening. I know we're a little delayed on this. Road games are going to be tough this year in terms of the post game, but we'll always get something to you. Thanks, Steve, for being adjustable. I am tired. Long flight today, and kind of getting back into the flow of things. The dog is excited. I'm home, so that's always nice.
I'm just glad we're not trying to push any kind of narrative or content and trying to come up with topics. We got football to talk about, players, position battles going on, and pretty soon regular season action. I'm loving this, and can talk all we want right now, because this is the fun time of year. Even though long days. And yeah, we're in the end, we are just watching football and talking about it.
Speak for yourself. I'm always trying to push a narrative. Yeah. And that narrative is pie is bad.
I thought you were going to say the narrative is you must like, subscribe, and
Well,
comment.
that's true. I mean, that's just a fact. But yeah, pie is stupid. Eat a cake or go away.
I make a pretty good pudding pie. I'll have to whip one up.
I don't want it.
It's really good though.
That goes against my narrative, Steve.
I'll just call it pudding cake then and give it to you.
Hey, okay, I'll do it. I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, that fits. All right. Thanks, y'all, for listening. This is Inside Black Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak. He's Steve Geller. Who dat? Go Saints. Peace out.
One more preseason game to go. Let's do it.